So we're now recording. Everyone, thank you for joining the Navionics Bass Pro webinar series. Tonight's topic is understanding offshore fishing structure for bass with Mike DelVisco. I've known Mike quite a while, so I'm myself very much looking forward to seeing his presentation and learn a little bit as well. For those, I have everybody on mute at the moment. If I don't, it's just mass chaos. If you've got questions, the last 20 minutes of the presentation is going to be question and answer. So if you've got questions, go ahead and type questions. I'm going to record them. And by the way, I didn't introduce myself. My name is Paul Mickley, National Sales Manager for Navionics, helping Mike here. So if you've got questions, go ahead and type them in. I would preface that if, as much as we'd like to answer, if you ask, hey, how do I fish Lake Kerr? Obviously, that's a little more detailed. We probably won't be able to get into that. So try to keep them very precise. You know, you might say how much you fish a ledge with a particular bait or something like that. So hold your questions till the end. I already see some popping up. At this point, Mike, I'm going to turn it over to you. And thanks for your help. I'll jump in about 20 minutes left, and we'll answer some questions.
Awesome. Thanks a bunch, Paul. And hey, welcome, everyone. This is kind of a new experience for me. You know, I do seminars all over the country, and I'm a past Bassmaster University instructor. And this is the first time I've had to do one right from my house, right from my office. So I think I could get kind of used to doing this. But, you know, thanks so much to the guys at Navionics and Bass Pro Shops for putting this, you know, whole series together and supporting it and, you know, putting these special programs together, because it, you know, really gives you guys a chance and opportunity to learn in depth some things from us, and, you know, helps us, you know, prepare better programs for you guys too. So we're going to be talking about, you know, understanding offshore structure. And, you know, I'll tell you right off that my style of fishing really does not suit offshore structure fishing. But, you know, I know from doing this for 30 years for a living that, you know, there's times when you really need to get off the bank and go find some fish that, you know, other guys aren't finding, or just an untapped fishery, and you need to get away from that shallow stuff sometimes. And, you know, this is like pretty much the perfect time to start getting off the bank and starting to look at offshore structure. So there's a bunch of things that I'm going to kind of go over with you guys from, you know, from the beginning to the end. And if you ever seen any of my seminars at sport shows or maybe a Bassmaster years ago, I go into pretty good detail and try to cover as much as I can. But if you've got any questions, we'll come on at the end and try to answer everything for you guys. So let's kind of get into this a little bit. Now, the one thing that's really important to learn about offshore structure is that, you know, there's a time and a place for it, and not all lakes are created equal. So wherever you happen to fish, now I live on a place in East Tennessee here called Douglas Lake, which is falls under this second bullet point right here. But you may not have that type of lake, you know, to your access, or you might not, you know, be close to a lake like that. You may be on a shallow flat lake with very, very subtle or very non-existent offshore structures. That's not to say that you can't figure out or go catch some fish when they get off the bank, because even those shallow flat lakes that have subtle offshore structures, those fish will get off the bank, even if it's a very, very subtle change in depth. I can remember times when being on those types of lakes in like a 2 to maybe 3-4 foot depth change was all it took to get those fish to be a little bit more comfortable. So, you know, we need to kind of put things into perspective a little bit, that not all lakes are created equal. Some lakes have that shallow flat stuff with very subtle offshore structure. Some lakes are very deep, clear, and rocky, like the lake I live on here on Douglas Lake, and there's tons and tons of, you know, different types of offshore structure here on this lake, from humps to underwater points and rock piles. Not a very ledge-oriented lake, but mostly, you know, isolated deep water spots way off the bank in, you know, anywhere from, you know, 18 to maybe 40 foot deep. All this great type of cover in this deep, clear, rocky lakes. Or you might fish a, you know, a river system like, you know, Tennessee River System, or any of the river systems in Alabama and places like that. Kentucky Lake and Guntersville come to mind as being, you know, some of the best ledge lakes that we've got in the country. Wheeler's another really good one, and Pickwick is another really good one. So, these lakes right here that have ledges, they're a lot different from those shallow flat lakes, and they're a lot different from them clear rocky lakes. And in my opinion, probably the easiest of the three primary types of lakes that have offshore capability of catching some fish is that river system with those ledges. And we're going to talk a little bit about that, and I'll show you a couple of places too as well that I really like to fish. So that's pretty much that. Now, advantages of offshore fish. Well, let me back up here. Let me put this into perspective just a little bit. And I am primarily a shallow water fisherman. If I had my choice, I would like to stay in 0 to 5 foot of water and throw a topwater bait and flip a jig and flip a piece of plastic and that sort of stuff in some kind of cover. It's the way that I like to fish. I like to cover a lot of water quick. I like to fish fast-moving baits as well as pitch and flip. And that's, if I can at all put together some type of a pattern doing that, then I would absolutely love to do that. But there's not always going to be the opportunity, especially now where, it's been, 90 degrees, 95 degrees the last couple of days here at the house, and the majority of these fish now here where I live are well offshore and they're well into their summertime kind of deal. And how I started to really force myself to learn how to fish offshore structure was I kind of put things in perspective. And one day I'm in the front of my boat and I turned around and I looked all the way back to the motor and I said, well, my boat's 21 foot, and with the motor it's probably 22, 23 foot. And I says, that's not a very long distance from the front of my boat to the back of my boat. And that's all, I'm basically fishing is that 20-foot zone. 18 to about 23 most of the time seems to be the real comfort zone for most fish that are offshore. And you can, decrease or increase that by, a couple of feet, 2 or 3 feet, and you go 15 to 22, 23, or even 12 to 18, somewhere right around there. So, with 20 or 22 feet being kind of in the middle of everything, from the front of my boat to the back of my boat is not a very long distance. Now, if you really want to increase that and go to 40 feet, which sometimes we catch them deep on jig and spoons and things like that here on Douglas Lake, those fish will have a tendency to go a little bit deeper than most places. The entire length of my whole rig is about 40 feet, which is not that far off as well. So, that helped me really put things in perspective that, if I was really used to fishing 2 to 5 feet, well, 20 feet was 5 times or 4 times more than that. Well, put it in perspective, and now it helps you ease your mind a little bit and get a little bit more comfortable with fishing offshore. So, what's the advantages to getting offshore? Well, number one, you're looking at potentially of locating and fishing an untapped resource. Now, that there is going to be obviously fish in shallow water all throughout the year. There always is, there always will be. But when the water really starts to warm up and those fish start to move offshore, the potential of locating an untapped resource is pretty great, because not a lot of guys are really going to spend a ton of time looking for these isolated little spots, and that's the things that I really like to look at when I'm out there and looking in deeper waters. I like to find some isolated places, just like I like to find in shallow water. You can make that correlation that, you find one tree, up on the bank that's, away from everything else, and you go up there and you catch a limit of fish out of it. Same holds true for finding, isolated deep water spots that may hold, an entire school of fish. So you've got that untapped resource right there at your fingertips. The other thing that I really like about fishing offshore structure, and this it is opposed to fishing the shallow stuff right now, is areas have a chance or have the ability to replenish. A deep water spot will replenish a whole lot quicker than a shallow water spot this time of year. You may go to a shallow water piece or tree or bushes or things like that and catch a few fish out of it here and there, but you're not going to have the ability, especially if you're fishing in a tournament situation where you've carted those fish away, you've weighed them in, they've released them, to go back to that same area the next day and catch some more from it. You will have that ability if you're fishing offshore and you're fishing deep, because you've got a constant stream of fish coming out of deep water moving up into those deep water places, and there's so many fish there that you pretty much cannot fish them out. You may have to let them rest a little bit before you go back and fish them again, but they will always replenish. The other thing that is an advantage too is that greater quantities of fish, for pretty much for the reasons that I just explained. But you're going to have greater quantities or bigger schools of fish out there offshore than you would if fishing some shallow water stuff. And you've also got, with the amount of quantities of fish, the potential for catching larger overall class of fish. So you could, not uncommon to pull up on a deep water spot, especially Gunnersville or a Kentucky lake that's known for 4 to 6 pound bass, and find an entire school of fish that are that size on a particular piece of cover. And I have noticed that is kind of a trend when you get on areas, and the more and more you fish offshore structure, the more you'll be comfortable with doing it, and you'll get a little rotation, a little milk run, just like you would fishing shallow water stuff. And what I've noticed that when you start catching, a certain size class of fish, it's pretty much consistent throughout. Now you may catch, a limit of 3 pounders or limit of 2 pounders, and all of a sudden catch one good one. But if you start catching a good one after a good one after a good one, 4, 5, 6 pounder, you're pretty much gonna, have that class of fish on those spots. And I don't know, what actually makes those fish relate. Maybe it's a food source or type of structure on the bottom. But if you find that that class of fish, you're pretty much going to be dealing with that the whole time. So with that being said, how do we recognize when to get off the bank a little bit? And pretty much now throughout the whole southeast and pretty much most of the country now, with the exception of maybe way up north. I spent the last 3 weeks actually fishing up in Maine, and that water was just starting to warm up to about 70 degrees, and those fish were, just kind of moving in here the last couple of weeks, moving up shallow. So they're probably another couple of weeks away here, far up north, of being out on some offshore stuff. But typically when I'll start to look for the potential of an offshore bite would be when the second wave of spawning fish is up. So what I'm actually fishing for here in the offshore is the first wave of spawning fish that's already spawned, those early spawners that spawn maybe the end of March, first couple weeks of April into the third week of April, and by the end of April, beginning of May, they're out offshore already. That happens quite a bit on some of your bigger lakes because you got to realize that not all fish are pre-spawn at the same time, not all fish are spawning at the same time, they're not all post-spawn at the same time. So there's a variety of different things going on. So at the same time that I'm starting to recognize some of this offshore potential, I'm actually have the ability to catch shallow fish as well too. Maybe some of those fish are still spawning, maybe there might even be some fish that are still moving up. Maybe there's some fish that are on a shad spawn, which is something that happens, down here, down south, or maybe even a bluegill spawn, which is kind of a really cool thing. But there's also a class of fish that has already moved out and been in deep water. And that seemed to happen here on Douglas Lake a little bit earlier than it has in the last couple of years. Now, I will tell you that last year, for example, here on Douglas, and it was like this in a variety of different places that I traveled around the country, is that the fish never really got set up very well offshore. They got out there for a brief period of time, about the 3rd or 4th week of May, and then they started to scatter, and a lot of those fish started coming back shallow. So you've kind of got to recognize this, that I think this year is going to be quite a different year because it's already starting to get really hot. And if you notice last year, temperatures were really a lot cooler than they were in other parts of the country here, low 80s to mid 80s pretty much all summer. It kept those fish scattered a little bit more. It kept more fish shallow, but the deep fish really never got set up. This summer is actually setting up because those fish have already been out there for, a good 3 weeks now, maybe going on 4 weeks. And they're really starting to get set up, and the water's warming up enough where it's in the mid 80s now, so that they're staying put and they're going to stay right where they are. As long as it stays hot, those fish will stay out there. But usually by about late May to mid-June, the majority of the fish that will relate to the offshore structure will already be there. Now, as I mentioned before, allow for geographic differences north and the south. You know, you guys up north, we've gotten to here, which I'm sure we do, that you're probably looking at, you know, the end of this month here in the next couple of weeks into the beginning of July for those fish to really get, you know, start to get offshore. And really be, you know, accessible to catch. So right now you probably got a bunch of shallow water fish that you can still catch as evidence of what I did last week. I caught most of them in 2 to 6 foot of water, 10 foot of water, and most of them will stay there for another few weeks. So I'm probably dating myself here a little bit, but I've been doing this now for close to 30 years, and you know, I've seen a lot of stuff change here in the last, let's just say 10 years. Things have changed quite a bit. You know, when I first started fishing, and I fished my first Bassmaster Invitational when I was a senior in high school. It was quite a long time ago, about 28 years ago, I guess is when it was. And we never had GPS back then. We barely had fish finders that could tell us, you know, what the bottom was, never mind having a GPS. So our GPS back 25, 28 years ago was your paper map spread on the floor of your boat with a piece of plexiglass on it so it wouldn't blow out of the boat, and that's how you navigated around the lake. Fast forward, you know, 15 or 18, 20 years, and you know, Navionics has come out with a lot of really cool stuff over the years. That they had a software product called Nav Planner 2, which in conjunction with my map, doing some map study and using that Nav Planner on my PC, you know, I was able to formulate or find a lot of places to go out there and fish before I ever launched the boat and got out in the water. So that, you know, when all this technology started changing, we started getting better fish finders, we started getting mapping on our units. Companies like Navionics started making, you know, some software to help us find places better. It really helped save a lot of time in being able to find these offshore structures, because prior to that, you had to just launch a boat and go idle around, or maybe, you know, study your paper map and try to find this stuff, and then, you know, use your map out in the boat to go find things. And now we've got, you know, a variety of tools with to our use here that we can use to find things really quick. And nowadays we've got, you know, web app and iPad apps and iPhone apps and touchscreen depth finders and charts on our recorders and all this, and it's a really cool thing to be able to use this technology and to be able to use it and put it to use and be able to catch some fish with it too. And that's, you know, what's really been kind of a fun thing for me with getting out offshore. It's a really rewarding thing when you know, take all these tools that you have to your availability and put them to use and get out there and catch some fish with it. And I did this last week in Maine, even though these fish were pre-spawn. Pre-spawn fish will use offshore structure spots as well as, you know, the post-spawn fish in the summertime, just kind of in reverse, where they're deep and they're coming shallow. I was on some humps and little, you know, dips and things like this, and you know, 8 to 10, 12 foot of water, and I'd pass right over a fish and see him right there on the screen and drop right down and catch him. And you know, it's really a cool thing when you're able to use all this technology and put it to use and catch some fish, because not only is it fun, but it will get you some confidence. And that's the biggest thing with being offshore, is being comfortable out there. So shallow water, you know, any of you can run down the bank and fish a dock or fish a tree or fish bushes, and it's a visual thing when you're there fishing. When you're out offshore, the only thing that you can see is your fish finder and your mapping screen and you know, your side scan and stuff like that, to be able to visually locate these structures in these fish. So once you start catching some fish like that, you get a whole lot of confidence, and that's a really big thing in being able to fish offshore. The more you do it, the more you'll be able to be comfortable doing it, and you'll do it a whole lot more. One other thing too, and this is kind of a unique situation for where I live, and you guys might.
Go on, Mike. Just a quick reminder to everybody. I'm getting a few questions. Just a reminder, as you've got questions, we're going to answer them in the last 20 minutes. So if you've just signed on, feel free to post a question in the last 20 minutes. I'm going to try to answer those. Sorry, Mike, go ahead.
Oh, no problem at all. Here's kind of a unique thing that goes on here on Douglas Lake, and some of you guys might experience this and some of you don't, but if you do, a really good way to take advantage of low water opportunities. See, Douglas Lake, they draw down in the wintertime, not even actually the wintertime, about September 1st, they start to draw the water down, and they draw it down steadily till about mid to late November, and by that time it's down about 40 feet. So there's a massive amount of structure and cover that you can still drive around the lake and go see, and I don't know how many waypoints that I've actually found just driving around the lake and putting a mark on it and coming back there and fish that spot and catching fish during the summertime. Because if you look over the top of my head right there, that entire rock pile is covered with water, and it's about in 10 foot of water when the water's all the way up. So you can see the advantage to having these low lake situations. And I know Douglas Lake is not the only lake where they have this drawdown. They have it in a variety of different, mostly these deep, clear, rocky lakes. So it'll really save you time when you're trying to locate structure. It lets you see the true structure too. If you look about in the middle of that rock pile, you'll notice that it's pretty much consistent. It's kind of heavy gravel and some scattered rocks, but right here in the middle of this, there's 3 or 4 or 5 rocks all in one pile. Now, if I was actually fishing this particular spot, that would be something that I would want to target right there. This little piece, maybe not the entire piece, maybe there's some fish down here on this drop, but more than likely there's going to be a bunch of fish right there, because see, deep water structure is no different from shallow water cover. Fish relate to differences in shallow water cover, and a perfect example of this is if you go to Guntersville and you go flip grass, and you may be flipping a mile's worth of grass and not catch any fish, and then all of a sudden get in a little spot and load the boat. There's a reason for that. We oftentimes call that a pattern within a pattern, or a spot within a spot. And the reason why those fish were there is there may be a subtle bottom change. It could be a contour change. It could be a slight change in depth. It could be a slight change in composition. It could be a little turn in the grass bed, which a lot of times it happens, those little turns or little points. Could be a variety of things, but whatever it is, I guarantee it's something that's just a little bit different. Now, if you look at this particular pile of rocks right here, that's something that's different throughout this entire structure, with the exception of this drop right here. So I would for sure look at this drop, and I would for sure look at that piece right there. So it really lets you see in pinpoint subtle changes in contour and composition. Primary types of offshore, and here's where we start to dissect some of these different things, and I've got them kind of picked to my 3 favorite things that I look for in offshore structure: humps or rock piles, underwater points, and then ledges. And you may find a lake that's got all of these things. You may find a lake that's got one primary, type of cover and structure, like Kentucky Lake or Guntersville is primarily ledges, and that's where those fish are going to set up. The lake that I live on, which I keep referring to, Douglas Lake, has got a lot of underwater points, and it's got a lot of humps and rock piles and things like that. It may also be, and I didn't include this one, something very subtle. Going back to that first slide that we looked at, that maybe it's a shallow, fairly featureless lake that has very, very subtle breaks in offshore structure. It may be something like a roadbed, and I'll tell you what, that's one of the best things that I can find when I'm fishing offshore is a little piece of a roadbed or a change in soft to hard bottom with virtually no change in depth. And that's a really, really cool thing to find, because unlike a hump or a rock pile or an underwater point, when you're driving down the lake in your boat and you see your sonar flash and you come up on a rise or go down off a drop or whatever, that's a fairly easy thing to recognize when you're driving. If you see something that has virtually no change in depth, it goes from soft to hard back to soft again, maybe it's a little gravel flat, maybe it's a roadbed, whatever it might be. Those are real fish magnets and stuff that I like to find, and especially on these real shallow, flat, featureless lakes. So that's another thing that you can be looking out for too. Whatever type of structure that you're finding, though, the best structures have irregular features like we talked about just a little bit ago. Whether it's rocks, stumps, brush grass, gravel, virtually anything that breaks up the structure feature of the piece that you're fishing. For example, let's go back and talk about maybe a roadbed. The roadbed may be a mile long, and you can relate it to the grass bed that we fished here in Guntersville. That we ran down there a mile and didn't catch any fish, and all of a sudden got to one little place and caught 5, 6, 10 fish, maybe 15 fish. You got on a whole school of them. Those features will be on these offshore structure pieces too as well. So you got to spend a little bit of time idling around, looking at the place, trying to find out where the sweet spot is in this offshore structure to be able to locate the fish. You're just not going to be everywhere, but they will be a lot of times related to these irregular features, whether they're rocks or stumps or grass, whatever it might be. So that's really what I'm looking for. When I originally find the offshore structure piece, that's great. I'm going to spend some time idling around and getting a little bit more used to what's actually underneath me before I start to fish. The other thing that all these features have in common is that they're going to be in close proximity to shallow water, coves, pockets, bays, flats, etc. Because all these fish do is they migrate from shallow to deep, from deep to shallow, shallow to deep, deep to shallow, and they do this throughout all the seasons. So in the wintertime, when they're really deep, they need that deep water for security. Water starts warming up, they start to move shallow. Water starts to warm up after they've been shallow and spawn and post-spawn, they go back deep again. And then in the fall, they come back again. So having that shallow to deep water transition is really key, and it's one thing that I look at with every type of deep water structure place that I'm looking for. I want there to be some kind of shallow water close by, because sometimes you may get out there deep and they won't be deep. They might shift up shallow, whether it's a change in weather. Maybe it's a real cloudy day. You've got a front that's come through and it's really cloudy, and those fish have gone from that real deep stuff up to the shallow stuff. So that they will change at times, but having that shallow water accessibility close by is a lot better than not having it. So let's take a look, and I'm going to show you a couple different pieces of this hump. I've kind of got a zoomed in piece right here, and this is a lake that's pretty close to my house. It's got tons and tons of humps in it, and underwater rocks. I mean, this whole lake is nothing but a giant rock. Cherokee Lake, got a ton of fish in it too, but this time of year they really get off the bank and they start to relate to that deep water stuff. And humps are probably one of the best features that I can find on a lake, especially a lake like this that has a lot of humps. And they're fairly easy to fish, and they're fairly quick to fish too, because this area right here, here's the hump right here. And there's actually another little one right there that comes up. That one's in about 27 foot of water. This one's much shallower. But you'll see, I think, on this next screen right here that I've got a hump right here and another one right there. Now this lake, if I actually zoomed out of this map, you would probably see 5 or 6 more. There's another one right up here. There's a little bit deeper one right there. There's some more down, scattered all about in this whole section. So the thing I like about fishing a hump is it's very fast, and it's a good way to find out if fish are biting really quick. They're either on a hump, they're either biting or they're not biting. And typically, you can use a hump at certain times a day with different baits and different techniques. We're going to look a little bit at baits here in a short period, but that's what I really like about fishing a hump, is that it's quick. It's not like fishing a ledge. It's not like fishing a big underwater point or a big other type of structure. You pull up on this and you start making some casts, and you're going to either start catching fish real quick, or you're not going to catch many at all. It's just one of those things, and you may have to come back. You know, you may fish it in the morning and catch a bunch, and then they shut down for a little bit, and you can come back, and midday they start biting again, or maybe late in the day they start biting again. But the thing that I'll try to do is I'll have humps in certain depth ranges, and what I've tended to do here over the last couple of years is really get into, when I'm saving waypoints, is to either put a little label or color coordinate my waypoints. And you can do this whether it's, you know, deep offshore structure places or shallow water stuff, so that when I know I get on a particular series of humps and maybe a certain particular water depth, I can run all those colors and be able to eliminate the ones I don't want to fish and be able to fish the ones that I do want to fish. So that's just one thing, and I tell you what, with these new touchscreen HDS machines, it makes it a whole lot easier for you guys that have used this touchscreen to be able to go in and save a waypoint and call something what you want and not have to mess around with the keypad of the old touch machines. I mean, keypad machines, scrolling through all your, you know, your keyboards and stuff like that. So it makes it a whole lot quicker doing it this way. Here's one thing to really pay attention to when you start to dissect this hump. Now, remember I told you that a lot of times there's little key elements with any one of these types of deep water spots, and I want to look, the best hump that you can find would be one that has a sharp contour line. And here's where your, you know, Navionics chips really come into play. And I'm fishing a HDS 12 with a platinum chip in mine, which gives you 1 foot in, contour lines. And I'm able to take this little piece right here, which is your sharp drop. And a lot of times fish are going to be related. If they're not directly on top of the hump right here, they're going to be off to the edge. And actually, to be honest with you, I'd rather see fish off the edge of the hump as opposed to being right on it. Now, maybe first thing in the morning, there's some fish right up on top of this thing feeding, which, you know, big spinner bait, swim bait, topwater bait, even a big crankbait. Those may be the first things that I throw on an offshore piece, just to see if there's any aggressive fish. Much like you would a shallow water area, you're going to fish, you know, aggressive reaction baits first, and then start to slow down with, you know, more methodical pitching, flipping, you know, that's worming, that sort of bait. But I may find some fish first thing in the morning right up on top of this hump. But if I really see fish and I take and I drive my boat around and I scan this whole area, I may get to where I'm driving this way and I run off the side of this edge, and it's a steeper drop right here as opposed to this right here. Uh-oh. Shouldn't have clicked that, should I? Oh, I don't know how to go back. Think of that.
Push the arrow key, Mike. You should be able to just push your arrow key and go back up. Oh, or you can do it that way.
Yeah, I just did.
That's cheating.
Yeah, I can do it that way. Is that it? Yeah, that's it. There we go. Okay, I'm learning. So in any event, the type of structure that I want to really find is one that has a sharp drop, because what I really want to find when I'm fishing these humps is during the course of the day, those fish are going to move off the hump and they're going to relate more to the drop on the hump, and that's really where I want to take advantage of those fish feeding, is whenever they're on the edge, much like it is when the fish are on ledges, they're more apt to bite, or more apt to get them to react to a bait. And ones that have a sharp contour drop, just like that, are really, really good humps. This is actually a really good hump out in the lake that I fish many, many times, and it's a really good one. So underwater points. And this is another thing that I fish quite a bit, and it's a fairly easy type of offshore structure to go find. You can find an offshore underwater point just by looking on your map or doing some homework with your Navionics web app and on your iPad and things like that, and you can find this stuff before you ever go out and fish, just like you can the humps. This is another place that I fish quite a bit. In fact, it's this point right here that we're looking at. Although I've got the pictures, I don't have the pictures lined up, but that's the deal. And this is the point that comes out. And this is, again, some stuff that, a lot of guys will find, a lot of guys will fish. There'll be certain places, just like I mentioned with all these other types of offshore structures, where they're going to be in one certain location. In the morning, they might be up right up here, right up shallow, feeding, and as the day progresses, they're going to kind of move out. So they may be up in this contour line during the course of the day. They might move out here on this little flat. They might eventually get out here real deep, or they may get out here, which is that rock pile right there. If you can find underwater points with some type of structure, whether it's rock, gravel, brush piles. We have a lot of brush piles down here, down south. Some of you guys up north have the privilege of being able to fish around grass. That there is absolutely, well, except for the stuff that's flooded, no grass in Douglas Lake, and a lot of our lakes down here, down south, just don't have that grass. But a lot of you guys up north have grass. So any of these, underwater points with grass or multiple types of cover, grass with rocks or just rocks by themselves, rocks and stumps, awesome place to be able to get out and catch some fish. So I'm going to, just like the hump, I'm going to spend some time and I'm going to idle around this stuff until I figure out exactly where I want to be and exactly where I want to fish. So that's just another example of some great underwater structure that has some character to it that you really want to fish. Now here's I took this screenshot the other day, and this is a small portion of Kentucky Lake down over by Paris, Tennessee. And this is probably one of my favorite ledges in all of Kentucky Lake. And I don't even know how many people have won money in one tournaments fishing these ledges, but there's a whole bunch going on in this one piece of area right here. And the first thing I'm going to show you guys here, get my mouse up, there's a multiple of different ledges on this one piece, and this is not a very big area. It's it's the length of width of Kentucky Lake down by Paris, and it's maybe a half a mile long here, maybe even a little bit less. But there's a little secondary channel that runs in, and it comes in here off the main channel. This is the main channel right here. You can tell by the color separation, main channel. There's a little secondary channel that comes in, and it kind of hooks up here. And this is the very first ledge, or one of my favorite little pieces right here, because it's fairly shallow right here. This will come up to 7, 8, 9 foot of water, and then drop off into 15, 16, maybe even 18 foot in a couple of spots. And this particular ledge is scattered with
Hey, Mike, you there? Yeah, it looks like we lost Mike. Hang on, everybody. Let me try to catch him again here. Let's call Mike's cell phone. Sorry, everybody. Hang on. Let me see if we can remedy this problem real quick here. Yeah, you did. Well, we still have your PowerPoint up here, Mike, but we lost everything else. Yeah, we still have your PowerPoint up, so everybody's on hold waiting on you. Bear with us, everybody. I still see you on. I see you on. I still see your Ledges PowerPoint up. All right, let's see if we got you. There we go. Now we got you back. Give me a little hello on there, Mike. We get your webcam up, and then we know we're back to running.
Hello, hello.
There we go. All right, I hang up on the phone. Sorry, everybody. Go ahead, Mike. We got you back.
Sorry about that. The problem with living out here in the sticks is you got to deal with satellite internet. Anyway, here is Paul. Where was I at? I was talking about Kentucky Lake. Did we get to the part where I was talking about this particular ledge right here?
I think that's where you left off, right at that ledge.
Okay. So anyway, this particular ledge is maybe a good half a mile long, and it's got a ton of different structure opportunities to fish, mainly stumps and some rock and some other harder stuff. But that's really the key to, finding fish on ledges. That, you go to Kentucky Lake and the entire lake is, for however long it is, I guess 70 miles or whatever, it's a 70-mile long ledge. So the thing that you really need to do is opposed to just running around and just stopping on a ledge and trying to fish, you really want to try to pick your spots, accordingly. So the thing that I'm looking to try to find with any one of my deep water spots is the availability for those fish to get, back into the creeks, back in some pockets. So I want close proximity to all those types of other structure features as well. Now, you can't see it on this map, but there's a big bay there's a big creek that goes in right here. And there's a couple more up here, and there's a couple more down there, and there's a ton of them over here on this other side that go in. So all these fish that, go up in those bays and up in those creeks and up in that shallow water stuff during the course of the springtime, they all tend to move out here, out on these ledges in a variety of these different ledges.
More technical difficulties. We need like the little color bar to pop up. I'm going to get Mike here again, and we're going to try it without the camera, see if that helps him a little. Sorry, everybody. Bear with me here. Yep, try hopping on, Mike, and let's just do it without the cam. Maybe that'll help. It might be kicking you off or something. See if it'll just work with Mike once we get you back on. Again, my apologies, everybody. I guess I should play some music or something while we're waiting for Mike. There we go.
Well, I love her, but I love to fish. I spend all day out on.
Oh, there's Mike. Mike, we got you.
Got me again, Paul?
Yeah, I got you. I was keeping him busy with some Brad Paisley while we were waiting for you.
I'm going to try to shut my camera off, although I don't think that's the issue, but
No, leave it on because I think your mic's working through your camera. It is. Leave your cam on. All right, let's try it again.
okay.
Sorry.
Sorry, guys. Okay, so back to Kentucky Lake. So here's the deal: is that we've got a ledge here on this side, and if you come over here, you've got another ledge that runs here off this big flat, and then you can come over here and get on a little bit deeper ledge right here on this little channel right here, and then eventually get over here on this really big ledge that's pretty much a main river ledge. So right here in this particular area, and I didn't even mention this one right here, which you can get to. There's a flat. You can tell by the color differences on your map that you've got this big flat ledge, somewhat of a flat ledge, another drop here, and another drop there. So there's an awful lot of things that you can fish all in this one little area of the lake here. But the thing is, you really need to get out and find something that's a little bit different with that ledge, and it may take, idling around, and now we've got, structure scan and things like that where you can idle down the ledge and find all these little structure features and things like that to really, make things a whole lot easier when you're out there, trying to ledge fish. But without the use of, my Navionics Platinum chip in the boat, trying to find this stuff would be nearly impossible. You just can't do it effectively with just a paper graph. So you really need to have those tools, accessible to be able to find this stuff and really fish it effectively. So the essential gear, we're going to talk a little bit about gear here. And I know, Paul, we're getting, I noticed the time's about 7:45 right now. So I'm going to kind of go through this a little bit quick. We'll try to get through some questions if we've got them. But, essential gear, you obviously need either a premium chip, platinum chip, or the Navionics Plus, a really cool thing where you can download portions of a lake and be able to use that on your plotter too, which is really cool. You need a marker buoy, and you've got those couple of things, as well as your electronics. That's the stuff that you need for locating offshore structure. So what I'm trying to do is, the first thing when I find a piece of offshore is I want to triangulate that spot. So I'm going to pick several things. I'm going to take 3 fixed locations to maintain the structure spot. Now, what I'm trying to do by that is I'm going to do that when I'm in my boat and looking around. I don't want to triangulate where the boat's going to be. I want to triangulate where this spot's going to be. Now, this is the target spot that I want to fish. So this is actually going to be what I am going to try triangulate. So there may be on this far bank, say a boat dock, there may be a big pine tree up here on the bank somewhere, and there may be, say, a tower over here. So I've got 3 fixed places. I've got one here, and one there. And I may even try to pick one more in back of me. May pick 4 spots, but 3 is usually good enough for now. And then I'm going to take where I think I need my boat to initially be. That's where I'm going to actually drop my marker buoy and put a waypoint. Now, there's a reason for that. I want the marker buoy and the waypoint to be where my boat is so that I can maintain correct boat position when I'm trying to fish this spot right here. If I do that and I catch a fish and I get blown off the spot, I can come right back to here and then triangulate this spot with these 2 or these 3 fixed places and know exactly where my spot is every time. But by having the waypoint and marker buoy right there, I can put my boat right back in that position again. That's a pretty standard way of what I do with everything that I'm fishing offshore. I triangulate the target structure, I draw a marker buoy waypoint where my boat's going to be, and that way I'm never off course. And I'm going to get back to this here in just a second, but bait choices, I'm going to obviously start with something that's a reaction style bait, and a big crankbait and a big plug is probably the best thing to be able to throw at offshore structures. Now, you guys are getting a sneak peek at 2 baits. This one right here and this one right here. They're not out in the market yet. They will be probably a little bit later this summer, probably the end of July, beginning of August sometime. There are two new baits from Storm in the Arashi series, 18-foot diver, 25-foot diver. These other ones are DT16s from Rapala, and there's a DT20 right there that goes 20 foot. And you may think to yourself, why do I need a crankbait that dives 20 or 25 feet? And really what I want to happen is I want this crankbait to go deeper than the bottom. I want that bait, because you got to realize when you throw your crankbait out and you've got your your target spot triangulated, you've got the area where waypoint saved and a marker buoy down where you want your boat to be. Now you've got to make your cast, and you've got to get this crankbait to come down and get down to the bottom real quick, hit that piece of cover or structure, and then start to turn back up. And where you typically get bit most with a crankbait is when the bait comes down and hits that piece of cover and deflects off, just like you would in shallow water, only you're doing it without being able to see the cover. You're seeing it with your electronics. That bait comes down and hits that piece of cover, and then the fish bites it. The other time when they bite your bait is when it turns back up and it's trying to get away, and that's when they'll bite it too. So proper boat position is a must when you're throwing a crankbait, and the longer I can keep my crankbait on the bottom and let it stay in contact, the better opportunity I have of being able to hit this precise little piece of cover or the precise area that I want to target with my bait. So pretty simple, and that's why a lot of times we're fishing a bait that goes like in 18 foot of water. I may fish that 25-foot bait just to keep it down there a little bit longer. In 12 to 15 feet, I may fish the 18-foot bait just to keep it down there longer. So, and you can do that with every size crankbait. So pick one that dives deeper than the actual water that you're fishing. Now here's one other thing to realize too is spots like this, like we mentioned in the beginning, you're going to be able to find or have the opportunity to catch multiple fish when you're doing this. So basically, you may catch 6, 8, 10 fish, and then all of a sudden they stop biting, and you don't get any more bites. It may be fast and furious for the first 30 minutes, and then all of a sudden it just shuts down. Well, did you catch every fish from this one spot? Probably not. I would rather try to figure out how to catch a few more fish than to really, pick up trolling motor and go to another spot first. I want to try to figure out how to catch a few more. So what I want to do is I want to change angles to get a few more bites. You'd be real surprised on any given spot, whether it's shallow or deep, how quick fish get used to seeing your bait underwater. You may catch the first half a dozen or 8 fish, and then they get tired of looking at your bait. You've got to try different retrieve methods. You may do a little stop and go. You may speed it up a little bit. You may try to maybe even change up colors and let them look at a different color bait, just to try to get a few more strikes. But a lot of times what I sense that if I change the angle which I'm throwing at these fish, I start catching more fish. And that's the exact reason why I want to triangulate this one spot, is so that every time I move, I know exactly, because I've got 3 fixed points, and if I've got the 4th, like I told you about, you may want to get 4, you'll be able to go on the other side here and now have a spot over here where I can triangulate from here to here, here, there's your spot. So I know exactly where the spot is. I know from my other waypoint about how far I need to be, so I can adjust accordingly when I go on the other side of the object and try to make some casts at that. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to show these fish a little bit different presentation. What I'm really trying to do, and if you can think about this, especially if a bass has been, seeing the same thing coming at him from the same direction, cast after cast after cast, is that what I want to do, I want to take advantage of his instinct to strike out before he ever knows what the bait is or knows what's there. And if this crankbait is coming down in this fashion right here, this is how I want the crankbait really to approach the fish. From here, I want it to come in back of him, because as the crankbait gets, he hears it, that crankbait's wobbling, the crankbait's vibrating, it's making some noise, he knows it's coming down. But when it gets right here and gets right in back of his head and it's wiggling, he's going to do one thing at it. He's going to strike out before he ever knows what it is, as opposed to the crankbait coming right at the fish, this way. This fish may be down here, and actually after the bait bounces off the cover, this one's prone to strike because the bait's done something differently. But if I got the fish to come and not even hit that cover and came right in front of that fish, he's probably not going to bite it. If I get it to come in back of him, he's going to bite that bait. So that's why you really want to show these fish some different angles to try to catch a few more, because you cannot catch every fish that's living on one spot. Real quick, I want to change things up here a little bit. I want to throw a worm or a jig, something on the bottom. I want to alternate between throwing that aggression or that fast-moving crankbait to, really slowing down and throwing a slower presentation. Maybe there's no wind, bright sun now, the fish are not very aggressive. You just want to sit down there and soak a football jig or a big worm, that sort of thing, and try to get a few more bites off these areas. You can certainly do that, pretty effectively with a slower moving bait. And then if you really want to give them a different look, the big spoons, which is, kind of the rage now, those big, ripping spoons and flutter spoons there will tend to catch fish that are off the bottom a little bit and suspended, as they will do on these offshore structure features. Sometimes they'll get off the bottom and they'll suspend. That in a big hair jig too. A couple of really, really useful baits to give the fish a little bit different look. So the very last thing here, contributing factors that make shallow water fishing good or bad also affect deep water spots, which we talked about. But low light conditions, first thing in the morning, really good time to take advantage of some of these offshore places with a top water bait, a swim bait, a big spinner bait, a crankbait, things like that. Wind and boat traffic. Boat traffic, as bad as it is sometimes, can actually turn the fish on, especially when you've got those flat days. Some days that here on Douglas Lake, because this water is so clear, I want some boat traffic. I want there to be, some disturbance on top of the water, kind of wind and stuff like that. So sometimes boat traffic acts a lot like wind does on these really, really calm and clear days. Fishing pressure can be a negative thing too, and there's nothing that you can do to avoid that. Just, as long as you've got a multiple of different places to go to, if fishing pressure gets too much, you can go and scout out maybe some even deeper stuff or some different types of cover, or maybe some places like we talked about on some of these featureless, fairly shallow lakes that don't have a lot of obvious deep water structure. Get out there and fish some spots that a lot of guys won't take the time to go fish. Current, obviously, on your ledge lakes like Kentucky Lake and Wheeler and Pickwick and Gunnersville, those fish are dependent upon cover to get them to position on the ledge where they're going to feed and things like that. Very, very important aspect this time of year when they're starting to generate power and current to get those fish to feed. And then approaching cold fronts. Anytime you've got an approaching front, shallow water fish are going to bite, deep water fish are going to bite as well. So all these things really, attribute to how well or how bad they're going to bite in offshore, just like they would in shallow water. And hey, Mike, I'm just going to leave that up for you guys to read there.
Mike, real quick before we go to the review, hey, just in case this cuts off, sometimes the GoToWebinar will cut off exactly as an hour. I do have your emails and your questions, so if it does cut off and we don't get to them, we'll get back to you via that. So go ahead, Mike, I'll let you do the review. I just want to let everybody know we will get the questions one way or another.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know we had a couple little technical difficulties. Sorry about that, and I got a little carried away at the beginning of this, talking a little bit too much. But I do have a pretty active fan page on Facebook. If you guys got any questions at all, I try to answer every single person that sends me a message. You can jump on Facebook, just type in Mike DelVisco fan page, keep track of what I'm doing. Check out navionics.com, check out basspro.com, all the great products that they've both got. And just to review real quick, don't be intimidated by deep water. Put it in perspective. Fish it just like you would shallow water, and take your time to learn a little bit and get more comfortable fishing out in deep water. Have the right gear, your Navionics Premium Platinum chip or Plus chip. Recognize the right kind of structure. Spend time to understand it. Just like I explained a little bit ago, the more you do this, the more you'll be able to be comfortable doing it. Change up your baits, fish a variety of baits. Start with some crankbaits, fast-moving things. Go to your jigs, worms, show them something a little bit different in the water column with your spoons and hair jigs and stuff like that. Fish different angles with your baits to show fish just a little bit something different. And make sure, no matter if you're fishing deep or shallow, that fishing is fun. Have a blast when you're out there fishing. And I really appreciate you guys being here and hanging in there through a couple of technical difficulties. Hope you guys have a great summer fishing and be able to put some of this stuff to use. And if you got any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them.
All right, Mike, let's see what we've got here. Well, we've got some time. I try to hit the more popular ones that I had multiple ones on. Chris and Damon both asked about how does water clarity affect offshore fishing on the offshore structure?
Yeah, and I haven't really noticed a whole bunch with lakes getting dirty, and I don't know if they're referring to if the lake gets real dirty, are they still apt to being out on offshore, or if the lake is really clear. Like Douglas is a really clear lake, and I do find that those fish will spend a little bit, will spend time being in a little bit more deeper water than your traditional, Stain to maybe just off-color lakes like, Gunnersville. I keep using those examples, Gunnersville and Kentucky Lake and those sorts of places. But I will fish slightly deeper if the body of water is super clear. But of course, I let the fish in structure dictate. I mean, if I find them in 15, 18, 20 foot, that's what I'm going to fish for them. Very rarely will you have a circumstance where you find them in one place and they leave because the water's changed. They may shift around, and that's one of the reasons why I like to find, especially with that hump illustration that we had, is that it had one sharp drop on one side. A lot of times when things change, those fish will come off the top of the hump and go down off that sharp drop. So they may adjust slightly, and get out in slightly deeper water and then shift back up as conditions change. But they've got that opportunity to do it because it's not a consistent offshore piece. It's got some diversity to it.
What question from Mike? What does hold on a minute here. Actually, it's from Marco. We saw your confident baits there, Mike. So what do you have any particular colors that you favor for offshore?
Yeah, if we go back, I can do this here.
No cheating.
I'm assuming that he's talking. What was that, Paul?
I said no cheating pulling up the whole presentation. I'll teach you the back button.
I just want to show this one. You'll see that most of the baits here are fairly standard, bait fish looking colors. And stuff looks like a bluegill or a perch, and stuff that looks like a shad. One of my favorite colors, this is a Rapala DT16 right here, and this is a Ike custom color called Caribbean Shad. It's kind of a chartreuse bottom, blue top. That is a really, really good color everywhere in the country. These two color patterns right here, the new storm baits, new Arashi deep ones. This one's kind of a shad pattern, or like a sexy shad, and this one's real similar to hot mustard that Rapala has. It's kind of a chartreuse color. Darkly colored back on a little bit of orange in the throat. So I kind of keep things really simple though. And here's one way to know if you've got the right color, getting in crankbaits a little bit, is if I start out fishing, say, this pattern, and the first fish that I catch, I notice that he's got that one hook in his mouth, and that's the only one he's got, just that one back hook. Let's say I get the fish in, and that's great, I've caught that fish, but I want to either change my color, which is what I'll usually do, or really change my presentation, because that fish has come up behind the bait and just pushed it, and he happened to get snagged by that back hook right there. If I go ahead and change to more of a chartreuse profile, or maybe this Caribbean shad, and I throw it out there in the next cast I make, the fish has got the entire plug in his mouth, that's the right color. But basically you need 3 patterns to go fish, with crankbaits. You need a shad pattern, you need a chartreuse pattern, and you need something that's brown or red. And if you have those 3, you can go anywhere in the country and go catch fish.
All right, here's another popular one is, does the current change, or I should say, how does current affect the direction of your approach when you're heading to offshore structure?
Yeah, I want to kind of approach it that if we've got current, those fish are going to be pretty much in the down current side of the structure. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get my bait, and of course I want to try to show the fish different angles, but my first approach is to try to get down current and then bring the bait in front of the fish and get it to ricochet off that cover and hit where I think those fish are positioned. And that's one of the hardest parts about fishing the ledge, is that number one, you've got to have some current to be able to get the fish to bite. And then number two, once you actually figure out how to get in a bite, you got to maintain your boat position and keep making that cast. But once you get all that stuff figured out, you can make the same cast over and over and over again, and just catch fish after fish after fish. Once you get that school ignited and they start to bite, it becomes pretty easy. But what I want to try to do is take advantage of those fish being on the downside portion. And again, like that ledge I showed you on Kentucky Lake, if you can find a big stump or a big rock or something like that that's on that piece of ledge, those fish will be in back of that stump waiting to ambush, bait or food source as it comes past them. And that's exactly what I'm trying to do with my crankbait too, is have it come in contact with that piece of cover, that individual piece of cover. The ledge is the overall structure, but the individual stump or individual rock or little pile of, subsequent pieces of cover are the ones where the fish are going to be located. So I take that into effect as well.
I'm going to do last three here, Mike. The rest are pretty detailed. So one of them is there any significant difference for fishing structure offshore between lakes and rivers?
I guess it depends on what type of a river you're referring to. Like you can go to, Pickwick Lake, and Pickwick's a river. Essentially it's a dammed up lake, but it's part of an entire river system. So if he's talking a fast flowing river, I don't have a whole lot of experience fishing that type of river. I don't know if you can elaborate a little bit on what type of river he's talking about. It may help me answer that question, and we can come back to that one in the end.
Okay, yeah, if he does, if he's still online here, he can shoot that as a question, and we'll see it on the Excel sheet. Does wind affect where fish stage on offshore structure?
Yeah, absolutely. And let's go back to the Clear Lake scenario here, that, without any wind, a lot of times in these real clear rocky lakes, those fish will be a little bit deeper, or they'll be out off the ends of this structure, like on those sharp drops like we saw in that hump illustration. Just because there's a little bit more security in those types of spots as opposed to being right up on top of it. And this is, I'm talking like, middle of the day stuff, from 10 a.m. to, 2, kind of that brightest portion of the day with no wind. And then, the wind can come up and it will reposition those fish. Maybe they'll come up closer to the top edge. I've seen times when, they've been much deeper in the water column when it's really still and really hard to catch. But as the wind starts to blow, they start to move up a little bit, and you'll see them as you keep graphing them. You'll see them starting to move up, and you'll see some streaking on your graph that will indicate some fish are starting to feed. That's the other thing I tend to look at too, is streak lines on my graph to see if the fish are feeding or not. As they become higher positioned on that drop, closer to the top of the hump, they tend to get a bit more aggressive and they start to feed more. And that's the same for ledge fishing too. If they're way off deep on the ledge, they're not as apt to bite, and if they're closer up on top of the ledge, they're a little bit easier to catch. So certainly wind has a lot to do with that, and wind is a lot like current too. Wind blows the water around, and it blows bait fish around, and it breaks up the surface tension a little bit, and makes the fish more apt to bite. And that's, whether it's shallow water or deep water, they all do the same thing.
All right, last one here, Mike, and we'll call it a night. Is since you started on electronics, I'll pick this one. So using your electronics, is there's an easy way to understand which is hard bottom and which is soft bottom by looking at the graph?
Absolutely. What you want to do, and again, I'm using, HDS touch machines or color, and one of the things with a color machine is it's a whole lot easier to be able to distinguish between hard, soft bottom, rocks, not rocks, that sort of thing. And I run the color palette that I run on my machine is one that has mostly yellow and red. And what you'll notice here, this is just a big pile of rocks, and it's pretty self-explanatory that this is some rocks, and this is what rocks would look like underwater. And you'll notice that, this line right here where it's really red and really pronounced, there's an individual rock right here, and there's another one right there. So this is kind of like a rock beside a rock. Here's another one right here. There's another one right there. There's another one off to the side right here that we can't quite see. And maybe there's another one right there coming, down into the water column. But the thing that you want to look for is the brighter pronounced that structure is in the bottom, the harder it is, like these real deep reds or rock. But if you do not see any structure, let me go back to this scenario of the hard to soft bottom transition, is a soft bottom will have a much thinner line. And I wish I had a graphic of this to show you. And as that line gets thicker, that's where the bottom gets harder. So wherever you see the actual bottom line, the width of the line of your sonar from here to here, that's really what I want to look at, the differentiation between that thin line and the thick line. The thicker the line, hard of the bottom, thin of the line, soft of the bottom. And that's pretty much what I'm looking at too. So that can be, really useful if you're fishing, say, just a big flat area and you happen to get out in there and it goes from sand or mud or, just a real soft, muddy bottom to something that's gravel. You may see no depth change at all, but you see the thickness of your line change from thin to thick. That's exactly the type of stuff that I love to find on these lakes that don't have a lot of cover, or lakes that have lots of offshore cover and a lot of guys are out there, but you happen to find that one little place that not a lot of people have taken the time to go find. And those are the really rewarding places when you're out there, fishing offshore.
All right, with that one, Mike, I guess we're going to call it quits. We've got a few more questions that are a little more involved, but I will send you the Excel sheet, Mike. I think there's about another 8 questions that are here. I'll shoot you an email on that tomorrow, and I appreciate you helping us out with this webinar. I've got a lot of thank yous from a multitude of people, and thanks for your help. I actually found it very interesting myself on quite a few different techniques in what you're doing, so thank you as well from me.
Thanks, Paul, and thanks, guys, for hanging in there with me. Appreciate it.
All right, good night, everyone. And again, if you want to see this again to review any of Mike's points, it will be on Bass Pro's OneSource as well as the Navionics website under webinars. Just go to our website, look for the webinars page, and you can review this webinar probably about 3 to 4 days and see our schedule of any others coming up that you'd like to take a part of. And of course, feel free to go to Facebook and friend Mike DelVisco, as well as sign up for the Navionics newsletter if you would as well. Good, Mike, highlight that with a big yellow. Get the yellow marker and highlight that sucker. Let's see.
My,
practice did. Oh, you closed.
Lost my marker.
You lost your marker. All right, thank you, everyone. Have a great night, and go catch some fish.